Welcome, YouTube family. I am back with my review of episode 2 of The Last of Us, entitled Infected. A more of a slow burning episode than what we got with the first one. Everything is centralized now with Ellie, Joel, and Tess. So we got a little bit more into their dynamics, but I think most importantly, this episode is we got some more insight on where the infection came from. Not all the details, I don't think we'll ever get that, but this is a little bit more insight into explaining how we got to where the world is today, which was very nice to see. So let's start off there. If you remember in my first recap, I talked about they mentioned on the radio that the disturbance started in Jakarta, Indonesia. And I don't believe that was said in the game. It might have been, but I thought this was going to give a little bit more insight into where it started. But I thought maybe it would end there. But no, it took us back in time. And we're introduced to a scientist, a fungal scientist that studies mycology. Well, actually, is the professor of mycology at the Jakarta University. She's picked up by the government and she's taken from lunch. She's whisked away. I'm not sure what the Indonesian government is at this point in time, but it's kind of giving the vibe that people disappear off the street when the government comes for you. We never see you again. So she's frightened. She's asking, "Did you get the wrong person?" And they tell her immediately, "No, we know exactly who you are. This is a big emergency. We need your help." So she inspects, a sample. She knows immediately that it's the cordyceps virus, but the bombshell that gets dropped is that this was taken from a human sample, which she doesn't believe, because up until this point, science tells us that the virus or fungal infection cannot live in human beings. So she's immediately taken to an actual corpse that was retrieved from a flour and grain facility, which is where the virus originated from. We don't know how it got there, and that's probably never going to be explained. But the first impression I got, if it was dumped into a food facility or if it showed up there, it's possible that this was actually bio warfare, possibly. I don't think they'll ever go that route. That's just too convoluted. But that's the first thing that came in my mind. It's hard for me to think it just sprang out of nowhere in the facility like that. But the scientist mentions immediately that's a good breeding ground for it. It's going to be immediately in the food. You have to imagine that Indonesia is transporting this food around the world. So it's already going to spread immediately that way. And we get a very somber moment because, the officer for the government is asking, we need a vaccine, we need your help to come up with some medicine. And this scientist is immediately distraught. She knows that this is an extinction level event, which was referenced in the first episode by those scientists and it's funny, we're getting scientists every single episode at the beginning. It'll be interesting because that's like an ongoing motif throughout the series. I think that would be kind of cool and just giving a background on all the particulars about the infection. But she says immediately that there's nothing you can do except bomb this entire city to try and contain it. There's no vaccine, there's no cure, and she immediately knows that she's doomed herself. She's in tears. She's like, let me go home and just spend some time with my family. And in theory, she's not even infected, but in her mind, she's like, just the fact that I was holding the infection, that I pulled it out of this woman's mouth, I can't be safe to leave. Everybody has to go in this city to try and save humanity. So we know that that didn't happen. And that gives you an insight into if this was how hopeless it was in her mind over 20 years ago, now we understand why Joel and Tess are kind of so hopeless now. And that goes right into the next scene that we see is Ellie in the fetal position, surrounded by what? Sunlight. So what does that image give you? It gives you an image of hope, of possible rebirth, and symbolizing that, as we know, Ellie is pretty much the shining light and hope for the rebirth of humanity. And the fact that she's in the fetal position, almost like she's in the womb, kind of brings that symbolism down a little bit more. She's the chosen one, even though she doesn't know it. And then we get to Joel and Tess that are looking at her. There's no light on them. As Tess later says to Ellie, we're not good people. All their hope is gone. Even when they can see right in front of them that Ellie had been bit before, the wound is actually healed and she's still not infected. So that lets you know that she's been carrying this around for a while and she's okay. But they can't rationalize that in their mind because they've heard for so many years about a potential cure, about something may happen, and it's never come through. So all their hope is lost, even when they're looking right in front of them, proof that this may be different. So that kind of shows you how far they've fallen, in this stage. And you can't blame them. This is over 20 years of just degradation. Everything that they knew about the world has completely collapsed. So you can't really blame them for feeling that way. But now the next thing that they do is they're traveling now. And this was really cool to see. If I know some of you haven't played the game, but I can tell you that the scenery is really just almost like it looks exactly like the game. They captured everything completely. It's a completely faithful adaptation. So I know all the fans were happy just seeing them going through, all of that setting. Of course, live it was probably green screen, but it looked exactly like what you expected the game to look like in real life. Uh, One big interesting thing that I like is they changed around how the infection spreads. Basically, we're introduced into a hive mind mentality. Number one, you mentioned before, there's no spores like there was in the game, but there's threads. There's fungal threads that can actually burrow underground like tree roots, and they can actually pick up on human beings. So if you step on one of them, that will send a signal to any infected in the area, and now they're all descending on you, basically a horde. So it's almost like suicide. If you happen to step on one of them, it's almost instant death. There's nothing you can do to get away. They're almost going to be on you instantaneously. When it happened in this episode, Joel mentioned they only have about a minute and a minute and a half to get away. That's how quickly they come. So that hive mind thing makes it very, even more dangerous. So now you have to even watch where you step. You can't just worry about walking by an actual infected. These hives or these threads will trip you up as well. And that makes me wonder. So if you have threads like that, if you were to destroy, I guess the fungal setup, does that not only destroy, the communication, but does it also damage the actual infected that may be in, a mile away or so? So that's something they didn't mention, but that is something to keep in mind if they're going to go with this approach. So that's the first thing that crossed my mind. If there's these fungal trees around, if you set them on fire, how does that affect everybody else in the hive mind? And we finally get introduced to what I was hoping would happen, the clickers. And the clickers were wonderful, same exact noise. They didn't change anything about the appearance. They move exactly the same way. And I thought that was the right decision. Noah Druckmann talked about it in the post episode wrap up that, you know, they came back to the game design because they felt that was the best design. Everything about the game captures kind of that fear that they talked about, the isolation of being in there with something that's a predator and your only escape is to be silent. But how can you be silent? You're walking through buildings that have been eroded for 20 plus years, have had no maintenance on them, that are in ruin. So how can you move through something like that without making any noise? You're almost forced to have to confront them. And I wonder how difficult it would be to take them down. And you saw how much work that Tess and Joel had to get through just to survive. And it also drove home that there's very much not any likelihood that you're going to survive a clicker encounter because what happened? Tess got bit. As careful as they tried to be, maybe if there were one of them, they could work together and subdue one. But two of them, there was almost nothing that they can do. There was going to have to be some type of sacrifice that had to be made. And with that sacrifice, Tess kind of finally, it dawned on her that she sees how quickly it spread when she was bit. You know, she's going to be turning within what, 10 hours or so. But she remembered Ellie getting that bite mark on her. Still nothing has changed, and even got blood into that same area, and she's still okay. So that drove that point home to her that yes, Ellie is the one that needs to be saved. And in the last ditch effort, she sacrifices herself, as we saw, by burning down that whole building or blowing up that building with the infected on Joel and Ellie's tail just to buy them some more time. Now, here's something that I thought was interesting. So, going back to that whole hive mentality thing, when the infected first came into the building, most of them were running past Tess. Because you were thinking in theory, if they know where you're at and they know that you're a human, they're going to attack you immediately. But no, dozens of them went right by Tess. So when I saw that, the first thing that popped in my mind was that, oh, if you have any of that infected in you, even if you haven't completely turned, they'll leave you alone. Kind of like with World War Z, when you had that infection in you, they just run past you. So that's what I thought was going to happen at first. But then there's one a little a little over dramatic, but I got the point. Where the one infected comes up to Tess and gives her the nasty fungal kiss to complete the infection. So I guess that theory's kind of out of the water. Some of them are just, I guess, reckless. Maybe some of them that have been infected a little bit longer, they can hone on humans a little bit easier. That might be the explanation that they go with. But it may just be an oversight in the scene setup to have so many of them just run past her and not attack her immediately, being that she's a lone human in there. But it served its purpose, buys Joel and Ellie some more time, and now they're completely alone together. So now, next episode, I think we're going to get a lot more warm communication between Joel and Ellie because they have no one else. Yes, they're on the road to try and get help, but it looks like next episode is going to be more of a flashback into what went on with Bill to get him to this point. So there's a good chance we might not see Joel and Ellie next episode because from that setup that Bill has, and for those of you who don't know who Bill is, I'm not going to spoil it completely, but just say that he's somebody from Joel's past that is very resourceful. And you just saw in the episode preview, he has a whole compound that he had booby trapped to try and keep the infected out. So that is probably going to take a whole episode to build that up. So I think that next episode is going to be a complete flashback. We might get Joel and Ellie towards the end, but I think the majority of the episode is going to focus on Bill and his journey to getting to where he is, how he got that compound, and who else is there with him, if anyone else is there, and how he's been able to keep people out. So looking forward to that. This was more of a slow burner episode than the first one. It went by quick, didn't hit me as strong as the first episode, and I think probably the reason why is just because we have a smaller cast this time around. That first episode was introducing so many people. We have Marlene in the mix, and just meeting Ellie for the first time. So I think just the smaller kind of character focused one made this more of a slow burner. We did get to see the clickers and we see how dangerous they are. So we know going forward, Ellie and Joel are going to have to be very, very careful about how they move throughout the city. And we still haven't seen any other human beings, and we know they have to be out there. Everybody can't be in the QC. So that's the next thing to keep in mind and keep an eye out for. So let me know what you think about this episode. Everything is moving along nicely. I don't have any complaints. As you probably already know, the first episode set a record. It's the second largest HBO debut since Boardwalk Empire. The only series that's in front of it is House of the Dragon. The premiere night last Sunday did nearly 5 million, 4.7 million people watched it. And then the following day, the 2 day tally was about 10 million people. So we already know we're going to get a second season. This is a smash hit out the gate. So I'm expecting that very soon. The only thing we have to see now is how far they go with this episode. I mean, with this season, how far it goes, through the game storylines or any new storylines that they create. So let me know if you're happy so far with The Last of Us episode 2. One thing I can say that I was wrong on, I remember, you might remember me saying that Ellie seemed very bloodthirsty with the first episode when she was watching Joel beat that guy to death. So I was speculating that maybe she had bodies already that we didn't know about, but she doesn't. She was very kind of, when she was put in that situation, you can see the fear. She had no idea about the clickers, and faced with that type of mayhem and even that skeleton when they were wading through the water, she's still very much, not accustomed to murder and death at this point. But I don't think that's going to last for long, knowing the type of universe that they're in. One thing I want to mention from TikTok, when I put that bloodthirsty video up on there as far as speculating about Ellie's mind state, somebody mentioned that because she's immune, maybe in this series they're going to go with the angle of the infection, even though she's immune, it's still eroding her mental state to a degree. That would be an interesting twist from the video game, but I'm inclined to think they're not going to go with that simply because that's kind of similar to the whole Mad Queen thing we went through with Game of Thrones. So I don't think they'll do that with the main female protagonist or anything similar to that a second go around. But let me wrap it up here. Let me know what you guys think. Just to let you know, I'll remind you, you're going to be getting recaps of every episode this season, posting Monday morning following the Sunday episodes. Uh, Feel free to let me know what you guys think, and looking forward to seeing you guys next Sunday. Like and subscribe if you like the content, and talk to you soon.